Well, hello there, you beautiful, beautiful, amazing, wonderful people. It is Wednesday, baby. That's it. It's Wednesday. It's Wednesday, wonderful Wednesday, and we all love a midweek hump. I could make a song about that. Anyway, I thought I'd wear my hoodie up today. To look especially menacing. You're looking absolutely amazing, I must add. And in this video, what are we talking about? We're talking about Annie Elise, who has recently did a video for her new, the thing that she do, serially, something like that. Who knows? Something like that. But she's been talking in response to a recent video that was done by Dateline, referencing Bryan Kohberger, you know, the guy who is yet to be found guilty but has certainly been accused and tried in the court of public opinion. We're not even going to go into the constitutional rights and what he's entitled to, because I think at this stage it don't fucking matter, do it? I don't think people generally care. Not on the grander scheme of things. Some people do, but there's a lot of people that just don't. For them, this is all just delaying inevitability. Just get on with it. But we're going to watch some pieces of Annie Elise's video just to touch on it. It's going to be like, like where before you go and buy a cake, you might go into a supermarket and they got a little plate with little bits of cake on it, so you can try it. That's nice, and go and buy the rest of the cake. That's like this. The link to this video will be in the description of my video. You can head over and watch it all if you want. I will have to stop this periodically as we move through this short segment that I'm going to play for fair usage. We don't want me getting struck down with furious anger and all that jazz. So I know it's annoying, but it's a necessary evil. So let's get into it and see what she has to say.
Of course, no, sadly, she wasn't successful and she succumbed to her injuries. Now, Ethan, who was found on Xana's bed, was likely sleeping when all of this first started happening. And you got to keep in mind, too, it all happened so fast.
Oh, pay very close attention to what she says here. Bearing in mind what we know and what she should know.
Even if he woke up to Xana's screams or her cries for help.
So issue number one. Did you spot it? Did you spot the glaringly obvious mistake here? So even if he woke up to Xana screaming, there was nowhere where he could go. There was nothing really he could do. Well, we know that there weren't no screaming. That's what is my issue with that entire segment of Dateline. Entire segment from them, their rendition of what happened to formulate a story that falls into the realms of trying to make people believe this is what happened and that's how the knife sheath got at the property. That's how it got dropped, because Bryan was in the thralls of whatever he was doing. Xana came in, and then he went after Xana. Now, I do not believe that that is how that happened, for the very reason that Annie Elise here makes a mistake, seemingly, to suggest that if that happened, you would expect that Xana would have been vocal in some way, shape or form. Again, this isn't click. You can't press it and turn someone's volume down. I think she'd have been freaking the fuck out and shout and summon anything, whatever. But she is, in fact, seemingly completely silent. Unless you want to call Dylan and Bethany liars. I'll bring it back up. I nearly started playing it without showing you it on the screen.
And he was concerned, there was nowhere that he could go to or escape. And to be fair, I'm not even sure if he was awake. The episode detailed that Ethan did not seem to put up much of a fight, and that based on blood spatter analysis, Bryan only had to stab him one time.
Definitely going with Bryan. Definitely. Not allegedly. Not allegedly either. Bryan only had to do it. He only had to do it once.
To kill him because it hit a major artery. Again, whether or not there didn't seem to be a fight because he was still asleep or still drunk, still passed out, or because that initial knife wound hit the major artery and killed him, we don't know. But the truly sick thing is that even after both Xana and Ethan were dead, Bryan took his time with Ethan. He started carving, this is a direct word, not my word, started carving his lower legs. Now, what he carved exactly, we don't know. But this, I think, also kind of ties back to Kaylee being in the room. I think he was angry at Ethan. I think that he was pissed that he was ruining the plan. And even more so, to take it a step further, and this is just purely my opinion, based on what we know, and
Check this out.
Based on information from his track record.
From his track record. So before we just delve into that, what do we know, before we get into that, what do we know about Bryan Kohberger's track record? Because that might give us an indication, a clue as to where she's going to go with this. I already know where she's going to go with this. But what do we know based on Bryan's track record that is going to offer some degree of support for what Annie Elise is now about to claim of Bryan Kohberger? Now, with respect of the crime itself, and that to me, again, it is purely speculative. The fact that she is saying that basically that these other individuals were attacked seemingly worse out of frustration, anger, whatever, I don't know. It's just something really strange about that, because this the entire premise of this is seemingly suggesting that Madison Mogen was the target. That's how Annie Elise was marketing this, that Madison Mogen was the target. But then you've got situations that places the killer going over 2 floors, and seemingly the 2 people who took the worst of it, and some of these injuries are very, very personal, and still done seemingly very, very quickly, if you believe the timeline, are the 2 people who shouldn't really have been there. Now, if Maddie was the target, you do have to make an explanation as to why Xana would then be attacked, and that's where you have to then bring in, well, maybe she came up and saw what was happening and he's caught her and then chased her back down. But then that wouldn't feed into the frustration with Ethan, who's passed out. If he's passed out on the bed and hasn't moved, he hasn't woken up, then what would be the frustration there? There would be no frustration towards Ethan in terms of he hasn't impacted this crime whatsoever. He's done nothing. He's had no impact in it. He's gone up to, by your statement, he's gone up to go after his primary target, Maddie. Yes, you could seemingly argue that Kaylee Gonsalves may have got involved in that, and that led to her being attacked more ferociously. You can then explain that, yeah, if Xana came up and decided to run off silently and be chased silently, and then again be attacked because he doesn't want to leave. If Ethan's not moved, then you leave. He could have, at that point, whoever did this crime could have left Ethan alone. The fact that Ethan was not only not left alone, but seemingly there was time taken. That's what she said, not my words, her words. Time was taken. That to me is indicative of someone who did have an issue with Ethan. So that doesn't go into he was there going after Xana unexpectedly. This situation was unexpected, and that was really to eliminate a witness of the crime. Because ultimately, this is an individual, whoever did this crime, if you believe what you've been told and what we've heard, at the point where Xana is seen and seemingly run off, he could have left and not even bother chasing it, just gone. Because we're then led to believe that he then stands 3 feet away from another witness and seemingly just walks off and leaves them alone. So there's a lot of questions around the crime itself. But the track record of Bryan, what is Bryan's track record? What, that he went to a party and spoke to a female, he then tried to ring her the next day, she didn't respond, so he didn't respond. He didn't go chase her up. He didn't say anything disrespectfully. He went on a Tinder date with someone who didn't really have anything fucking beyond, nothing odd to say. Do you know what I mean? Or he went to a bar once and made a fucking comment about some girl and got a fucking slap around the head or whatever. Well, I've been there. Do you know what I mean? So I don't understand where this is going, but you're about to find out exactly where it's going. But just bear in mind that she has said that this is based off Bryan's track record. So let me know down below how you feel about that.
I think that Bryan hated women, and I think he hated men who had the opportunity to be with women. Another word for that you may call it is an incel. And I did a video on this with Elliot Rogers, who was an infamous incel who went on a killing spree, and the similarities between him and Bryan Kohberger and what I thought. And based on Bryan's history with allegedly grading women too harshly, hating women, wanting to punish
TA, a TA grading women too harshly. Bryan was a harsh grader, and TAs get criticised all the fucking time. There is nothing abnormal about a TA getting criticised by their students over grading, marks, and how they dealt with it. That is just part and parcel of that role. To say that that is an indication of Bryan Kohberger being an incel is fucking lunacy. Absolute lunacy. And look, everyone's entitled to their opinion. Annie Elise is entitled to her opinion. This is my opinion. So ultimately, we can have things to say and and thoughts and feelings that don't align. But in my opinion, to say that Bryan Kohberger was an incel because of, well, one of the things, we'll get to another one, because he marked females, and it wasn't just females, it was students' papers as a whole. He was someone who would mark papers harshly and had been told, apparently, it's all apparently, to go a bit easier. He obviously had a statement, and at no point in time as well has she at this point addressed the fact that Bryan, in addition to being a TA, which is a position of authority that sadly is up for a rebuttal by students, she doesn't mention his ASD either, that can also feed into why he would potentially request and expect such high standards and be quite blunt in his response to the situation when he feels that he's not getting the results that he should.
Them looking up explicit material about forcing them to do things, drugging them to do things. I think he hated women. And I also think that's why he was targeting a woman. But I think he also hated men, especially men who were with a woman the way he wanted to be with a woman. So the fact.
But Bryan could have been with a woman himself. It's like we're trying to now put Bryan in a box that he literally couldn't have been with a woman. We've literally heard that again, in the very same program that she's talking about, we hear of one specific female who had tried to approach Bryan in a romantic sense, and that he had basically, no, look, I see you as a friend sort of thing. I don't see you as anything more than that, which potentially leads to another story that I'm kind of on the fence with, that is hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, where she then goes on to potentially try and throw him under the bus that he may or may not have entered her property. But so in terms of this video, Annie Elise, again, I completely respect that people's opinions, but what I find difficult in situations is that Annie Elise, a big creator, 1.47 million subscribers, and the way that she talks about this situation is not, even though she'll turn around and say certain things like, this is my opinion, but she will very cleverly make statements such as, Bryan only had to stab him once, Bryan only had to do this, Bryan did this, Bryan said that, Bryan had these issues, and it's very suggestive. And when you've got an audience that, like, how many views has this actually got? I'm waiting for the people to go, oh, you're just jealous. 312,000 views. And this is someone who doesn't generally do Idaho 4 content. This is just someone who likely has a team around her. They put something together and she narrates over what they have put together based on their research. And this is kind of off the back end of a current hot topic, which is the Dateline situation in a story that is virulent at the moment, being the Idaho 4 case. But she holds a lot of weight. She holds a lot of weight, and the way that these things are put together, they do influence a lot of people. They absolutely do. So when you're making statements such as, or you're trying to support this is just my opinion, that he is an incel, and then utilizing that Bryan Kohberger was a harsh marker of females. Do you know what I mean? And yes, she did touch on these searches that, again, Dateline had raised with respect of what Bryan Kohberger had searched on pornography sites. And it's like, but we don't actually know if that part of what Dateline said is accurate at this stage. Now, it's obviously 50-50, but it's not 100%. And truly, when taken on its own merit, does the fact that he may or may not have searched these specific things, does that mean that he's a killer? Could it have been that he was doing studies on Ted Bundy, for instance, and he wanted to get inside the psyche of Ted Bundy? Was he doing a paper or some degree of research that meant that he kind of had to go down a Ted Bundy rabbit hole and try and see what sort of things would be what Ted Bundy would have been involved in? We don't know. There is no context. The only context that we have is a hit piece that's put together to make people feel a certain way about a certain individual, and anybody can put a certain spin on it. But on their own individual merit, they don't add to that person being a killer. Do you know what I mean? It's a difficult one because we're told that Bryan Kohberger is the person who that has been accused of doing it. So you have all these things that will start to build up, this circumstantial evidence, and there will become a tipping point. But then when you really, really look at them, a lot of them have no attachment to this crime whatsoever. It's simply about trying to attack the person as an individual and what sort of person they are to make it more credible that he is the person being accused. Well, of course he's the person who did it because he graded women badly, harshly. He searched these things online. He searched Ted Bundy. He took hoodie pictures of his hood up. But there you go, that's Annie Elise. Bryan Kohberger did it and he's an incel, apparently. And the reason why you know he's an incel, because he was a harsh marker. Love you all. Mwah.